5 or 6 contenders every single season. And then you're gonna have two teams fight, or 2 or 3 teams fighting for the championship. And
Hmm.
then all 3 of those teams could potentially make the playoff because they're all going to be that good. You're going to have Alabama, LSU, and Oklahoma. You know, if they're all 3 lost teams, but their losses are to,
To each
the
other.
other teams, it's
Yeah.
just it's going to
Yeah.
be tough, man. I mean, Texas A&M, when they moved, that was a big deal. So now that's essentially 3 Big 12 teams that have transitioned over to the SEC now. I mean, that's gonna be crazy. The SEC is already, one of the best conferences, and they just got a lot better.
Yeah, that and so I kind of want to actually take a step back before we dive into that. So here on the webcast, we encourage everyone to try and watch different sports if they haven't in the past. We love to talk about them. We want your comments. Please comment below about all the sports that you love to watch. So college football has, this year starting with James Madison joining from the FCS to the FBS, 131 teams across 10 conferences that are going to be battling out in the FBS, which is the top division of college football. So, yet the college football playoff, right, only accepts 4 teams. So
It's not enough.
so moving forward with that news that Oklahoma and Texas are moving to the SEC, and the news that we heard at the beginning of this summer was that both USC and UCLA are moving to the Big Ten starting. Again, it was supposed to be 2024. It might be as early as next year. That is 4 of the biggest, teams west of the Mississippi moving east of the Mississippi and joining the Big Ten and the SEC. So if you are a part of college football and the college football playoff committee, who have already denied expansion all the way up through 2025, past 4 teams with the current agreement, do we need to expand it? What are your thoughts overall on where college football should be moving towards?
I understand. They don't want them to play 15, 16, 17 games a year. But if they're going to have 131 teams and 20 of them are in 2 of the most competitive conferences that there have ever been, you can't deny a 3-loss Wisconsin and a 3-loss Oklahoma from getting their chance, because if they were in the Big 12, or say USC, if they were in the Pac 12, they're 100% going to be winners of that division. It's tough. I think it at least has to go to 8, but I also don't want to see regular seasons getting shortened just so the playoffs can be longer. As a fan, it would be better because you're watching better football games. You're watching better teams play more often.
Yeah,
I don't
so
know. I just feel really bad for like Illinois and those teams.
yeah, these teams that are
they used
going
to
to
get a slight break with like a Northwestern and a Minnesota, but now they have no chance.
Yeah. I mean, in my opinion, they've never had a chance anyway. They start the season knowing, arguably, if they go undefeated, that they still, might be on the fringe of even getting in. As we've seen more and more every year, the college football playoff committee don't appreciate conference champions as much as the eye test, so to speak, with teams who aren't winning their own conference making the playoff over, Ohio State did over Penn State, over the actual conference champion. If the SEC, it just seems like they're just going to take the 2 that play in the SEC championship game. So
every single
so that doesn't even matter. Now, what I find super interesting, especially over this last summer, as we get closer to teams, really as we get closer to the big boys moving conferences, your Texas, Oklahoma, USC, and UCLA, as we get closer to that date, all the conferences are scrambling, and they've been scrambling this past summer. We've already seen, we have an FCS team, as I said, James Madison, moving to the FBS, which I think is a very interesting step. By 2024, we're going to have 3 of the 7 independent teams moving into a conference, including BYU moving into the Big 12. by 2024, I think as well, you're going to have even more FCS schools jumping up. Jackson State, you know, get to see Dion every Saturday as a coach there, taking Jackson State to Conference USA in 2024. So the interesting part for me is you can see from all angles, everybody is trying to get a piece of the pie. Everyone is trying to move to what is really going to become super conferences. The Big 12 is acting super fast. They are looking now to add 6 more of the Pac-12 teams. So you already lost USC and UCLA to the Big 10, and now the Big 12 is looking to poach Oregon, Utah, Arizona State, and Colorado, I think, and 2 others. So you're going to have, and they're not going to be the only ones trying to poach Utah and Oregon, especially. So you have all of these teams moving, and it looks like it's funneling into the Big 10 and to the Big 12. You also have FCS schools, some of the bigger names, James Madison, Jackson State. We'll see if, North Dakota or any of those teams, South Dakota, end up joining as well. But you have 130-ish teams in the FCS, 130-ish teams in the FBS, 260 teams total. And everyone looks like they're trying to migrate to 2 conferences in the Big 10 and in the SEC. So my personal opinion is they need to scrap this whole conference thing altogether. 10 conferences in the FBS, the however many in the FCS, and change format completely. You have 260 teams. I don't know really what it's going to end up, but it looks like you can't have 50 teams in each conference. You can't have that. You can't have 50 in the Big 10 and 50. So,
I mean, Big 10 used to mean something. Used to mean
exactly
10 teams in a conference.
Yeah.
They changed it from the Pac-10 to the Pac-12.
Yeah.
But now they still have like 14 teams. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. And so I don't know where the future of college football really will lie. But I know that this structure, the way that it's set up right now, it can't go anywhere. And so what gets my mind start to think on where it can go is looking at other sports or other leagues that have this number of teams. We're talking 260 teams at the D1 level. Obviously, FCS has its own restrictions, number of scholarships, stuff like that. That's going to keep those teams kind of below FBS teams. And even then, we've already had the division between Group of 5 and the Power 5. And the only other thing I can think of is European soccer. And you look at something like the FA Cup, for example. The FA Cup starts with around 700 teams. And you have 6 preliminary rounds, and you whittle all the way down, and it spans across 8 or so professional leagues in England that are all one after the other. The higher league that you are in, the later in that competition that you get entered. So if you were in the Premier League, which is the top division in England, you don't enter the FA Cup in any of those preliminary 6 rounds. Or even the first 2 rounds of the actual tournament, you enter in at the 3rd round. Yeah. And so, but what's so nice about that tournament, for example, is you have teams who play in those lower divisions, even deemed non-professional leagues in England. And if you can win your preliminary tournament games on the field, actually beat the competition that you are drawn against, you will get your chance to move up and go to the next round and go to the next round and go to the next round. And you will continue to play harder and harder teams. We saw the famous Kidderminster Harriers 2 years ago go from the 6th tier, which is separated in 2 divisions of 20 teams. And their stadium is just the greatest. It's like 2 sides of little stands, and then they have a hot dog corner that you can actually see from the field. It is the greatest thing. And they made it all the way to the 3rd round where the Premier League teams that, it cost like, $80 to $100 just to get a ticket into their grounds for, the Harriers stadium. And they got to play against West Ham in that tournament and prove themselves. They even tied after 90 minutes, and they went into extra time. And I love that concept. every team that entered that tournament has a chance to win on the field of play. College football, however, I don't believe has that same level of fairness, for example. Even when we go back to 2014, when the college football playoff started, right? The whole idea of this was we were finally going to have a true national champion. Finally, we are going to take 4 teams. It's not going to be, we're going to have a committee that actually selects them, made up of athletic directors and various other positions, and they're going to select the 4 best teams, and we're going to rightfully have a playoff and determine the national champion. Ohio State, the inaugural champion, after winning that, renamed the street outside their stadium Undisputed Way to signify that they were the true champions of college football, entering as the 4th seed in the playoff. 3 years later, UCF goes undefeated, wins all of their games, including their bowl game. And they weren't invited to the playoff. They didn't play in the semifinal or the national championship. And yet they declared themselves as the national champion. And we are right back to square one where we started. So this whole system of being fair and, winning it on the field of play just went completely out the window. And it only took 3 years. And
it's going to get even worse with the super conferences, because UCF can still keep winning their conference, but now
they're not.
A 3-loss Oklahoma would be taken over an undefeated UCF because of conference strength.
Exactly. If you don't play into these 2 big conferences, then you don't matter. And
I mean, you won't. If you can win the ACC, you can win the Pac-12, Big 12. They don't care anymore.
Yeah.
Because who'd you beat?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? If you beat Penn State, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and then you go Michigan and Michigan State, and you lose to, 1 or 2 other teams, they're going to still put Ohio State in because they beat all of these teams that are more than likely going to be ranked in the top 25.
Exactly. And on top of that, the teams that you are adding into your conference to replace the better teams that have left, for example, the American, who are losing Cincinnati, UCF, for example, are replacing them with teams like Charlotte and teams like FAU. Cincinnati lost 26-6 to Alabama last year. FAU are combined 80-7 over the 2 games that they've played against Alabama.
They scored,
think
that's impressive?
Yeah, I know, right? That's impressive, right? They got more points. Yeah, I mean over 2 games, but yeah. So you think that if FAU goes ahead and wins the American, that and maybe they could, without they're going to have even less of a shot to do it. And I think as a college kid going into every season, thinking that this doesn't matter on me winning a national championship or even getting onto that stage that could launch you into being a draft pick. If you are from a school like FAU or you're from a school like Charlotte and you win conference win the American and somehow get selected into the playoff and you have a great performance, that could push you from not being undrafted into maybe being a 5th, 6th, 7th round draft in the NFL. It changes your entire life. And I think it's completely an unfair setup for most of these kids. And when you have, by 2025, my opinion is you'll have 20, like you said earlier, 20 teams in the Big Ten and 20 teams in the SEC when you start thinking about, okay, what's Notre Dame going to do? Clemson, Oregon, Utah, Florida State,
Absolutely.
University of Miami. So I want to get your opinion too on this, right? So let's say you have these 20 teams in each conference, right? You can't play everybody. So you're going to have to divide it. Each
that's
conference.
Another thing.
Yeah, you're going to have to divide it into two sides of each conference. I mean, similarly how they do it now, and then play for a national championship. So let's say you divide it into 2 groups of 10. So now you have 9 games, right? Same kind of setup. You have 9 games, play everybody once inside your half of the conference. Winners will play for, the Big Ten or SEC championship game. But what would you do with those 3 games as you do now? If you're Ohio State, for example, or Alabama, and you are in this conference, you're not even playing everybody in your conference. And those first 3 games, you are scheduled to play Northeast, West Carolina, and, Texas Southern State or something like that, Or you could switch it and play some of the teams in the opposite side of your conference, your
Absolutely.
Georgias, your Wisconsins, that kind of stuff, especially from a revenue standpoint. What do you do?
Oh, you 100%. You have to play. You have to play the other, 3 teams from the other half of the conference, because one, it's going to generate more revenue for the schools. They're bigger games, but it's not fair to the other side of the other conference, or the other half of your conference, to not get their chance. So say if Ohio State and Michigan are on one side, or because if Ohio State and Michigan were on the opposite side, that would always be that 10th game. That would always be the 10th game. They would play each other. So then they would really only play 2 other teams from the other side. So they'd have to be in the same conference. But that's not fair if Wisconsin and Penn State are on the other side, and they never get their chance to try and knock off Michigan or Ohio State from the title. You know what I mean? Because Michigan and Ohio State could be undefeated going against each other at the end of the season, play each other. You have one winner, but they could both go to the Big Ten championship if they're the best teams. But if Wisconsin and Penn State don't get their chance against them, then that's not fair, because they 100% could be undefeated as well. But since Michigan and Ohio State played against each other, if it's a close game, you know what I mean? I don't know. It's just, or if they play the Notre Dame in the second game of the season, and Notre Dame's ranked 10th, and then they beat them, that's just another game on their resume. It's just, to me, you have to play the teams, as many teams in your own conference. I already don't like the gimme games in the beginning of the season, and I think it's absolutely criminal for Alabama to play their last 3 games of the season against East West North Carolina. I think it is. It's crap. It's not right.
Yeah. We have a comment here. It says, "Hi, Adam. Hi, Ben. Hope you're doing well. Good to see you on here." But I totally agree. And the other angle to this now, it was announced last couple of weeks. I don't know if the official announcement is that. Maybe it is. But the Big Ten has reached an agreement starting in 2023 with Fox, CBS, and NBC for $1.1 billion a year going to the Big Ten for their media rights. So you're going to have segments of games where you have Fox is going to keep their big noon kickoff, and then CBS will get the afternoon slot 3:30, and NBC will keep the evening at 7:30, which sounds familiar because that's exactly how the NFL is. And so if you are NBC, CBS, and Fox, and you have these teams in your conference, let's say it gets up to 20 by 2025, it could easily be at 20 teams in the Big Ten. And currently scheduled, you're going to have your, Ohio State, Michigan's, USC's, UCLA's playing, those teams in the group of 5, or even some FCS teams, Bowling Greens, your Toledos, your Central Michigans, these kinds of teams in those first 3 games. And instead of maybe having Wisconsin, USC, or a Penn State, Minnesota, or, Penn State, however you want to do from East and West, however that shakes up to be. So if you're paying $1.1 billion a year and you have 20 teams in your conference, and you let's say Fox gets Ohio State, Notre Dame, and NBC gets Michigan, USC, and CBS is stuck with the prime, the 3:30 slot of Penn State, Central Michigan, when they could have had Penn State, USC, or Penn State, Wisconsin.
Penn State, Michigan State,
Exactly. I think they're going to be pushing, I think, very hard to get all of those games for all 20 of those teams to be within the same conference and not be playing outside of it. And I think that's the tip of the iceberg for kicking everybody outside of college football and sticking with these super conferences that control all of college football, and nobody pays attention to anything else.
It's going to be extremely hard for Toledo, Bowling Green, Central Michigan, FAU, even like bigger schools like Utah that are technically not in another, they don't have any plans yet of switching conferences. Yeah, they're not going to get any, people would rather go to Minnesota because they're going to be playing all these big teams. game week in and week out, and they're going to be in the best, one of the best conferences there is. So they're going to be playing against the best teams week in, week out, trying to prove themselves to make sure that they get drafted. They may not win the national championship. They may not even win the Big Ten championship, but at least they can say that they shut down every single receiver in the Big Ten, as a cornerback. Yep. Or if they're a quarterback, I win against Penn State, Wisconsin, Ohio State, Michigan State. They can just rattle off all these teams. But Utah, I mean, they're going to lose. I mean, granted, UCLA hasn't been the greatest, but historically they're a great school. And USC, who's always been one of the best schools in the Pac-12, if they're going to lose those teams to play against, they're not going to go to Utah. They'd rather go to Michigan or Ohio State, or even Minnesota or Northwestern, because they're going to play these teams. So I think it's going to be really hard for anybody outside of the super conferences to be competitive at all anymore. I mean, nobody's going to even want to watch those bowl games because, you used to get even like
now
Illinois,
bowl games are dead.
Right. And but for teams like Illinois, who really fight for that 6-win season, you can kiss that goodbye. They'll never get another bowl game if there's a super conference. Yeah. Because you'll have a 7-win Michigan State. They'll go 7-6, but they'll still make a bowl game because their 6 losses are to
much better,
some of the best teams. And so it's going to be really difficult. They're going to have to lengthen the season. They're going to have to make more playoff games. It's just going to turn into, a 9-month season, 8-month season. It has to.
Well, let me, I've been playing with an idea here, and I don't know what the future of college football is going towards. From just the facts that I see, it's going towards 2 super conferences, maybe 4. Yeah, if the Big 12 can save itself and the ACC can save itself once Clemson, Florida State and University of Miami figure out what they're doing with their lives. But in my personal opinion, from a competitive standpoint, what I would absolutely love to happen, and I haven't ironed out all the details on this, but I would absolutely love to get rid of bowls.
Oh, yeah.
Get rid of all the bowl games and expand the playoffs, okay? And expand them to the point where everyone who wins one of their conferences, right now there's 10 conferences in the FBS anyway, everyone who wins that gets into this giant playoff. And then on top of that, you'll have a second tournament, okay? So you have the top tournament for all of the conference winners, and then you'll have a second tournament for maybe those next 3 or 4 teams. Usually that is about where, that 4th, 5th team is usually the team that ends up about 500 that gets that bowl berth anyway. And so you take all of those teams and you put them into their own tournament as well. And even if you want to take, 1 and 2 of each conference and put them in the championship bracket, I guess. And then you can take the other teams and they can play it out as well. And you can kind of make a system similar to the Champions League and Europa League in soccer, where at the end of each season, the top 4 teams from England, for example, will qualify for the Champions League for the following season. And teams 6 and 7 will, are 5th through 6 will do the Europa League, and 7th will be the Europa Conference League, which is even a 3rd tournament there.
Yeah.
And they get to kind of compete against similar teams who finished 5th and 6th or 7th in their respective league in Italy, Germany, Spain, France, whatever. And it allows all of those teams to fight for something in the season, right? Like your Illinois, your Minnesotas, your Tennessees, who they know they're not going to beat Alabama and Georgia and LSU and Auburn in the same season to win the conference, maybe.
Absolutely not.
But what they can do is win 1 or 2 of those games and get themselves into that secondary playoff. And a playoff where they're going to be marquee matches because there's a trophy, there's a tournament. We're excited to see these teams play.
It's not just a cash grab bowl game. That means nothing.
Exactly. That means nothing where you're traveling to the Bahamas.
Nobody goes to Illinois so they can play in the Belk Bowl.
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody does that.
And so I would love to see it. It's definitely more competitive that way, and I think it'll give teams a chance of winning, and they'll know that if they do miraculously, Tennessee comes out and is just able to ride that high-powered offense and put up 40 against Alabama and squeak away with a win there, and then put up 40 against Georgia, and all these teams to actually win the SEC. That no matter what, they won the SEC, they are in for a chance at the national championship. Or if you are Jackson State and you join Conference USA and you're an FCS school 2 years in, you win Conference USA, you have a chance to earn it on the playing field to go out and win. We have another.
Think there should be the winner of all the 10 major conferences?
Yeah, I mean, I would have to break it down like numbers wise, especially when we have so much movement in all of these conferences. I mean, right now you already have a plus or minus 3 teams in each conference. Some have 14, some have, there's 7 independents right now. Where are they all going to go? You have Pac-12 with 12, you have the Big 12 with 10, Big 10 has 14 right now. So it's like, you'd have to break down all the numbers on, who's what. But yeah, usually it'd be like the top teams would go. I mean, we see with Alabama and Georgia, for example, they play in the SEC championship. And the biggest question leaving that game is, did the loser do enough to get in? That's like what our question is. It's not, oh, congratulations to whoever won. It's, did the loser do enough to get in?
It's just what seed are they going to get?
Exactly.
If they don't get blown out, they're going to get either first seed or third seed. And if they get blown out, they still might squeak into fourth.
Exactly. And so, the conference championships for the bigger conferences might be diminished a little bit with this system, but it's better than winning it and not getting in like Penn State did a couple of years ago. Or, even a team like Utah won the Pac-12. They got a Rose Bowl game, but they didn't get in to the college football playoff. And, first time that they've won it in a little while. So
yeah, I like it kind of like a March Madness bracket and then the NIU bracket. So they still play for something.
Yeah. All right. We have another comment here from Salonis. I agree the Big Ten is a bigger brand than the Big 12, but with the Big 12 adding Cincy, BYU, and Houston, what conference is more talented? Currently and in the future, it'll always be the Big Ten. I'm interested to see what the Big 12 is going to do with these additions. Can they add an Oregon? Can they add a Utah? Will the Big 10 add Notre Dame? We're going to be diving into that next week as we preview Ohio State, Notre Dame. And then some of these other teams, especially from the ACC, is the ACC just going to sit still as the Big 10 add, the SEC add, the Big 12 add and lose, I guess. Pac-12 lose. So it'll be very interesting to see.
I would love
what
to
happens
see
there, but
if these super conferences happen, you need to see teams like Clemson and Florida State go to the SEC. And you need to see teams like Notre Dame and Cincinnati come to the Big Ten.
Yeah.
It's because you just need to make it more of a North versus South, and
and that's what it's going towards. If you're going to have 2 super conferences where you have the Big Ten versus the SEC, I mean, it's already kind of Big Ten versus SEC. Every single champion, well, ACC, I guess it depends if Clemson, I guess, joins in. Which I personally want to see Clemson, Florida State. Let's see, Clemson, Florida State, University of Miami, Notre Dame, Utah, and Oregon all jump ship and move to either the Big Ten or the SEC if we're going with the super conferences, because I think that those teams playing in those conferences would be a marquee matchup every single week. As a fan, super conferences are super exciting, right? Now, the problem with it is, yes, now every week as a college football fan of, or a neutral in a way, or a fan of a team like Michigan, as you are, who is already in the Big Ten, already a huge brand. And yes, they are one of the 10 teams to win both college football and college basketball. It's great because now you get to watch your team play a marquee matchup every single week, fight for the biggest prize in college football. But as we saw last summer in soccer, we saw the attempt at a Super League, which took the top 2 teams from Spain, the top team, I think just Juve from Italy, top 5 teams or so from England. And I don't know if Bayern ended up joining or not. PSG, I think, were in there from France. And they were going to have a super conference where they screwed their own leagues. They weren't playing in their own league anymore. They were going to only play each other, and they couldn't be relegated out of there, and they would just play and play and play. And within 24 hours of that news breaking, all of the fan bases and all of Europe, really, were storming the stadiums. You had the fans run onto the pitch at Old Trafford, Manchester United. You had protests everywhere. Commentators were just asking for, there was petitions for these teams who joined the Super League to be deducted points in their league. Some even get relegated from their top division down. Some get kicked out of the Champions League or the Europa League for the next season. They were going for blood. And the reason why was because all of the other teams wouldn't have a fair shot at anything. And on top of that, the top division, there was no relegation anymore there. So they just always would stay there, and there's no competitiveness there. Like, they are raking in all of the money, and yet they're never going to get kicked out. They don't have to keep improving. They're always going to be getting the money.
Then the Premier League and the Bundesliga and all these other leagues, they would lose all of the TV time, all the big games, because you wouldn't have a Liverpool versus a City on Sunday for the Premier League. You would have it in the Super League, and so the Premier League kind of just vanishes because it doesn't mean anything anymore. Even though it's the biggest league right now in the whole world, it would kind of not mean anything. And so I don't want that to happen to college football, where it only matters about 2 conferences and there's no competitiveness. You know that the national champion is going to be either from the SEC or the Big Ten. It just takes out the, when USC may win it or when Texas would win it. It just takes that away.
Yeah, and as a student athlete going into each game, I love that term, student athlete. That's just so great. I love that. NCAA trying to tout around that they help everybody get a degree and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, that's the point. It just makes it unfair for them, where they could know stepping on the field every Saturday is just for them to step onto the field. If they win, great, but it's not going to get them anywhere. It's not going to guarantee them anything. They can't earn it themselves. They have to earn it as much as they can and pray that they are given it on top of that. And I just don't like it. We have another comment from Slonis here, which is a very interesting one. I've been shouting about a 2 playoff system. I consider dividing the playoffs by recruiting class, which is a very interesting idea, especially when you look at how much data and even money there goes into recruiting. You're starting to really recruit people who are almost out of middle school, entering high school.
13 years old.
Yeah, they're the ones who are getting recruited, and there are metrics on all of them. And every year 247 posts out their recruiting class. They even have what's called a blue chip ratio, where they define the number of 4 stars and 5 stars that each team has and how much of a percentage that makes up of your total roster. And based on that blue chip ratio, they limit it down to about 15 teams that can actually win the national championship, because historically all of them have reached a certain threshold. I can't remember what it is. It might be just 50%. If you have over 50% of your roster as 4 or 5 stars, that's what gives you a chance to win the national title. So that'd be interesting if they purely just, everybody would be, kind of goes back to the BCS system where we're using polls and, computer algorithms to figure out who's the best teams. And
based on strength of schedule and API and all these other things, instead of just watching how they play on the field.
And just earning it. That's the thing.
By every single game, but they'll win by the last minute field goal. But
they win.
But the computers don't care about that. Yeah. But if we see that Alabama is going out there and beating everybody by 40 every week, but they lose to that team in their conference title game, it's like, Alabama's clearly a better team than the winner of the Big 12.
Yeah, you would think as well, but also that's the thing that I also don't like as much. And I want, and I threw out the idea of the get rid of the bowls, multiple playoffs, 2-tier playoff system, where you earn it on the field of play. And, you can even do it where if, let's say, the Conference USA champion gets paired up against Pac-12 champion, and in that game the Conference USA champion wins, well, now maybe that team will get a bye for the following year if the bye positions are calculated in there. I don't know, there's a bunch of ways to do it, but I want them to be able to play, and if you win, you get to prove yourself against higher competition. If you win your group of 5, then okay, great, here you go, here's a higher team, can you beat them? And if you do, you should earn yourself a right to sit at that table every single year. And
I agree. If you win, you're in.
Yeah, and I mean, even if win,
you're in.
Yeah, and nobody
should boil down to, really.
Yeah, and nobody would expect, let's say, even if like that team that beat Nick Saban's LSU. I can't even remember who it was forever ago, but some group of 5 team beat Nick Saban's LSU. Obviously, nobody expects LSU to be a worse team than them. And every day after that, every day before that, they would say LSU is a better team than that team. However, they lost.
That's why you play.
And that's why you play. And we're not giving up national championships to start the season. Otherwise, we would just go back to the BCS system. Exactly. And I don't agree with it. And I'm really interested to see now. So I wanted to have this episode. Usually, for all these sports seasons that are coming up, we're doing a prediction show right before it. So our prediction show will be next Friday, 7 p.m., where Doug and I are going to be predicting who we think are going to make the college football playoff, preview the Ohio State Notre Dame game as well, which is Saturday night. But I really wanted to have this one because I really wanted to talk about the state of college football, because it is very interesting, and I feel like it is on a knife edge on where this is going to tip. And I fear that it's going to tip the way of being super exciting for some fans and ruin all of competition for everyone else, and eliminate the chance of a student athlete who is staying at a local school at home to do something special. Like your Cincinnati's, your BYU's a couple years ago when, they were, the Statue of Liberty play and all that kind of stuff, and being on a national stage and all that kind of stuff that we love about college football. And the reason also too, for anyone who follows the FA Cup in England, the oldest sporting competition in the world, over 150 years old or something like that, you get to see teams who play in the 6th division, whose players sometimes are, electricians during the day and play soccer at night.
Groceries,
Exactly. And the Premier League teams whose dressing room has heated seats and lights and closets have to travel to a stadium like Kidderminster Harriers, who's might barely not having a working heater in the away locker room, or use fold away chairs, because they earn the right to play them and they have to play them. And that's what you love about sports, because if we just gave it away to whoever we thought was going to win in the first place, then what is the point of even playing? But anyway, we'll be previewing the season. And as a sports fan, I'm super excited for this season. A lot of great non-conference games to start the year. Alabama, Texas, Notre Dame, Ohio State. I think BYU. I can't remember who BYU's playing. Maybe Clemson. I can't remember. But a lot of great matchups. But Doug, it is nearing the end of the show here, and I want to get your 9 other guesses for the 10 schools that have won college football and college basketball as a men's program. Okay. Michigan, obviously, I already gave you as one.
We got Michigan.
Yep.
Ohio State.
Ohio State is another one.
I'm trying to think of, big basketball schools, but you have, Kansas and North Carolina and Duke, but I don't think they've ever won any football championships. So
Yeah, North Carolina. I'll tell you a story about North Carolina real quick because that was the team that I went to first, and the reason why is because of this guy behind me, Archie Griffin. I went to a North Carolina basketball game and was lucky enough to sit next to a player that played against Archie Griffin for North Carolina. North Carolina ended up spanking everybody that year, and I had thought that they went on to win the national championship, but they did not. They went 11-2, and one of the reasons why, or they went 11-1. Sorry, they went 11-1, and the reason why they went 11-1 that season was because in the first 2 quarters of that game where they played against Ohio State, they knocked out the starting and backup running back of Ohio State to allow the rookie running back in Archie Griffin to go on the field for the second half and run through their entire team. And that was the story he told me, and that is the reason why they lost that game. And so I thought for sure that they were going to have it. And that's
you got a freshman nobody who comes out to be the only player to ever win 2 Heismans.
Yeah, absolutely incredible.
This is just why you play. It's amazing.
Yeah, for sure. But anyway, they're not one of them. So that was one of my guesses that I got wrong.
I'm trying to think of historic schools. So somebody like a Boston College.
Yeah, that's a good guess.
Maybe them. Mm-hmm. Notre Dame, maybe.
Also a good guess.
Pittsburgh.
All 3 of those not on here, but all good guesses.
Man, I don't know history.
Yeah. The one team I'll give you did it very close to each other. Actually, I don't know if they did it. Let's see. Was it the same year? It might have been even the same year. 2007.
That doesn't help me.
No. Was it 2000? Yeah, 2007 they won college basketball. Back-to-back champions, I think 2007, 2008. Joakim Noah was on their team. Carlos Boozer on that team as well. University of Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Florida.
So Florida, the one of 2 SEC teams to be on this list. Can you guess the other? I'll give you one guess.
2 SEC teams. Are we talking Super Conference SEC teams or just
no
SEC teams?
Current. So Florida's one. Florida's one of them. And then who is the other? It surprised me. I would have never guessed.
Georgia?
No, Arkansas.
Arkansas.
I know. Incredible.
I can't believe they won either national championship.
Yeah, I know. But that goes back to your kind of more of a historic approach. One team which made sense once I heard it, but I never would have thought of it. Syracuse.
See, I thought Syracuse because they're so great in basketball, but I never thought they were ever good in football.
Yeah, it's kind of like your Dukes and your Kentuckys, right?
Exactly.
It's like, how would they do both? But yeah, Syracuse is one of them.
How about
the
maybe
most
UCLA?
Surprising? That UCLA. Yep. Obviously, with the basketball domination, they just needed to get football, and they were able to do that back in the day. 2 other current Pac-12 teams are on this list with UCLA, and Oregon is not one of them.
Okay. Wow. Pac-12. Arizona or Arizona State?
Nope. You'd think with their dominance in both football and basketball nowadays, but no.
Utah?
No, not Utah either.
Man,
we are looking at the. I know, right?
12 teams.
We're looking at the brainiacs of the conference.
Stanford.
Cal and Stanford. Yeah, Cal and Stanford, the other 2 there. So that is 8 of the 10, and the other 2 are both Big Ten teams.
Big Ten teams. Wisconsin.
Yeah. Nope.
Michigan State.
Michigan State is one of them, and then last one.
Penn State.
Maryland.
Maryland is one of football championship.
Maryland indeed. Yeah, I know, right? So you got Ohio State, Michigan State, Maryland, Cal, UCLA, Stanford, Syracuse, Arkansas, and Florida. Top.
How many did you say you got?
I got 4.
I think I got 4 with your help.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, you just kind of throw out
Yeah, I
throw
knew
out
2.
teams, yeah.
Michigan and Ohio
Yeah.
State. That's pretty much all I was
Yeah.
very confident of because
Yeah,
I've been alive
it's
for both of those.
exactly. So it's tough. I mean, there's some. I mean, Arkansas surprised me. Syracuse was one that surprised me, but like after I thought, about yeah, it kind of makes sense. Florida was 2007, which was a nice one.
That makes sense. Yeah, I remember. When they
Had to watch them dominate, not dominate, but beat Ohio State Final Four and stuff like that. But
dominate's about right.
yeah. I mean, Carlos Boozer and Joakim Noah on the same team already. I think who was their point guard? I'm blinking now. But anyway, yeah, that's gonna wrap up our first episode here of really college football for Friday. Next Friday, 7 p.m., we're going to be talking about all of our predictions, our previews for the upcoming college football season, which is set up to be fantastic. Are we going to have the second person in history joining this man behind me as the only two to win back-to-back Heismans? Bryce Young returning, which is great. He'll get a shot at that. And obviously,
we're not
going
to predict all 131 teams.
No, we will be doing our college football playoff. Our 4 teams that will be making our college football playoff, but also previewing Ohio State, Notre Dame. The marquee matchup of the first week. All of the artwork that you see here is done by Smiley Sports Artwork. The link is in the description on Instagram. Go check out her page. She is making more and more artwork for us, and we are super glad to have it. She did our new college football edition logo of the webcast that features the only 2-time Heisman winner in Archie Griffin. So go check her stuff out there.
Remember,
Doug,
guys, we are not only soccer and college football.
No,
we will be doing all sports.
All sports.
So if you don't find your video that you want, just give it some time.
Yes, exactly.
We'll get to your sport.
We're building it up to it. We got a lot of things coming here on the webcast, All Sports One Web. We are working on it currently. Wednesdays, EPL, Premier League action. Fridays starting off today and continuing next week will be college football. But as Doug said, a lot of things to come. So please put in your comments on what sports you want to see, and will someone please teach me cricket, because I would love to learn. And by that, I'll see you all next week. I'm Adam. That's Doug.
See you guys.
Bye for now.